Welcome, my friends, to the vault. This story happened when I was 17 years old, but before I go on and explain the story, I'd like to give a bit of a backstory to this story. My aunt lived in this weird house where you could just sense that someone or something was in the house with you, especially the basement. As I gradually got older, I always seemed to have experiences wherever I went. I honestly don't know if spirits are attracted to me, or that the spirit that my adopted aunt unleashed while playing a Ouija board likes to follow me around and taunt me. Either way, no matter where I went, I always seemed to have paranormal experiences. This particular story isn't scary, but it's really creepy nonetheless. A few years after my parents had separated, we moved to a suburban town in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. It was just my mom, my younger brother, and I. We moved into a townhome with 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and an unfinished basement. My mother and younger brother had moved in before I did, since we weren't all living together before moving into the townhome. She had painted the living room walls brown, and the lights in the main bathroom upstairs gave off this orangey color. My brother had the room at the end of the hallway, which was pretty small. I had the room right beside the bathroom, and my mom had the room beside my brother's room. My room, in particular, was the creepiest when I first moved in. I would walk into the room, and the whole room just felt heavy and not so welcoming. I had a couple of experiences before this, like my door slowly closing on its own, and my brother and his friends and I getting partially possessed by something. But those are different stories for another time. This story in particular is the story I would like to talk to you guys about, because there's just no explanation as to why it happened, besides that I could have hallucinated it all. But once you hear the story, you too will agree that there's no explanation for it. So, like I said, I was 17 years old when this happened. It was late at night and I was sleeping in my room. My brother was also asleep in his room, and my mother was the only one up watching TV downstairs with our 9-year-old purebred husky named Dakota. I got woken up by this presence of a dog and a light growling noise coming from the area where I could feel the presence. Thinking it was our dog Dakota, I waved my hand in the air and said, "Not now, Dakota, not now." I could still hear the light growling, so, in an annoyed voice, I lifted my head up and looked towards the area I felt the presence in, and yelled, "Dakota, not now," only to find he wasn't there. I looked to my door and saw it was closed. In confusion, I thought nothing other than I was hallucinating, and fell back asleep. Minutes later, I got woken up by the same growling noise, but a bit louder this time. Again, I waved my hand in the air and said, "Not now, Dakota, not now." And again, he kept growling, and I yelled, "Not now, Dakota," only to find him not there. I looked at my door in confusion again, still not thinking anything of it other than me just hallucinating again. I then again fell back asleep. I then got woken up by this loud bark that filled the room, and I sat straight up in my bed. I looked around in confusion, not knowing where the hell it came from. Feeling kinda creeped out and scared, I got up from my bed and ran downstairs to see our dog Dakota beside my mom on the ground, and my mom watching TV. Even though I knew he couldn't have been in my room, There was another part of me that thought my mind was playing tricks on me. So I asked her, "Hey Mom, was Dakota in my room just now?" She looked over at me in confusion. "No, he was down here the whole time." I felt really creeped out and confused, and I really didn't want to go back to my room at this point. But I went back up to bed, and it didn't take me long before I fell asleep, because after I heard the loud bark that filled the room, it felt like a weight that was holding the room down was lifted, and it felt lighter. A few years later, while hanging in the same room this incident happened in, I told my younger cousin that lived in that weird house about the creepy and strange night. She told me that it could have been our great-grandmother. I looked at her in confusion and asked her how this could be. She told me that during the time she had Alzheimer's disease before her death, a year before the incident, that she would make little barking noises, and I looked at her funny and asked her why she would do that. She told me that she didn't know. It was just something that she would do. Well, great-grandma, if that was you that scared whatever the hell was in my room away, I thank you very much and miss you. If it wasn't, well, I'm glad I got the fuck out of there when we did, because I don't know how long I'd be able to handle a haunted townhome. Okay, so I'm a long-time lurker, but first-time poster. But after reading everyone else's stories, I think that you'll be interested in hearing mine. Now, I never really experienced anything major in my nan's house, but I heard these stories both from my nan before she passed away and my mom firsthand. So, my nan, granddad, and their 5 children, including my mom who is the eldest, moved into a large suburban house in southeast Essex in the UK in the 1980s, which had stood empty for a while. The house was modern, large, with a big garden that sloped quite dramatically uphill, until at the end you reached a large concrete fence with an alleyway that ran behind it. On either side of the house were other large houses, so by no means was this an isolated, old, creepy mansion. When my grandparents were looking around the house and considering buying it, they both felt a creepy presence, almost like being watched, particularly on the upstairs landing, but they chose to ignore it as it was very cheap and perfect for their family. Apparently, for a few weeks, everything was fine and the house was perfectly normal. One day, my Uncle John was playing in the garden when he looked up and saw a dark figure in the upstairs hallway window, beckoning for him to come inside. According to my Uncle John, it had been the same shape and size of my mom, who at the time would have been 18. So he assumed it was her and ran upstairs to see what she wanted. When he got to the upper floor of the house, he discovered no one was there, and the only person in the house was my nan, who was painting inside of the garage. When he asked my nan if she had been upstairs, she replied no. She had been in the garage for at least an hour and hadn't left. At this point, my uncle was relatively young, maybe 13, so he just put it down to his imagination. From then on, things started to gradually get slightly more creepy, particularly at night. The whole family would hear the noise of a woman crying in the upstairs bathroom, even though it was empty. There would be scratches and banging noises from around the house, and they would see shadows out of the corner of their eyes. A few months later, my nan decided to ask their neighbor if she knew of any hauntings in the house, or any strange goings-on with the people that lived there before them. In the UK, we don't have any laws that require an estate agent to tell you if anyone died in the house, or if anything violent happened there. So Kathy told my Nan the story of the Chinese family that lived there before my grandparents. They were a large family, and Kathy had known them well. The mother had suffered from depression, though, and had slashed her wrists in the bathroom and ended her life. Kathy said that this had broken the family apart, and they quickly moved out. She also mentioned that on the anniversary of her death, the family would gather in the alleyway behind the garden, say some prayers, and throw a bunch of flowers over the garden wall. Now, my Nan was not a spiritual or religious person, and didn't really believe in ghosts or anything like that. But 1 month after her conversation with Kathy, they discovered a bunch of flowers had been thrown over the concrete fence and into the garden. This kind of crept my Nan and the rest of the family out, but they weren't going to move out of their dream house because of a woman committing suicide in their bathroom. The first thing my granddad decided to do after that was replace the bathroom and completely redecorate it. This ramped up the level activity in the house massively as they began to hear screeching at night, and my mom often tells the story of how she used to have her hair pulled whilst walking around the house. My granddad decided to leave well alone at that point, and the bathroom remains the same to this day. Before my Nan passed, I used to visit the house at least once a week, but often more, and I can tell you there was definitely a creepy vibe. It was nothing definite, but the house just felt off. Even when I was little, and way before I was told these stories, I refused to go upstairs and would only use the downstairs bathroom, even though it was situated outside in the garage. As my mom and her siblings had moved out, and my granddad had died many years before, my Nan was often alone in the house. Eventually, my Nan decided to move her bedroom downstairs and redecorated the downstairs bathroom completely. Although she blamed this on her back, there was something she definitely was not telling. She was a very open and honest woman, but she would clam up when you asked her questions about changing rooms. To this day, I believe she saw something in the upstairs that freaked her out so completely and never went up there again. That meant, for 3 years until her death in 2013, the upstairs of the house was virtually untouched, apart from being when my mom used to clean. After my Nan's death, my parents and their siblings tried to sell the house, but no one would buy it. One couple apparently even said it was just too creepy. So now, it remains empty, and the only people that go in are my family, aunts, uncles, and cousins, to maintain it and keep it looking nice, until someone decides what to do with it. It's been a while since I lived in the house that this story is about, but the unexplained experiences I had during that time I lived there are the most intense I think I will ever have. I remember the day we first walked into this historic home. I was a young teen and was nursing a springtime cold. We had been looking for a new home for some time, so my brother and I were not overjoyed to be house hunting again. This particular home stuck out due to the fact it was on the same street that my parents' first home was located. My adult sister, who lived with them at the time, still claims that my parents' old house was haunted, but won't elaborate. Our future home was grayish-blue with large fir trees in the front yard, and was built in craftsman-style architecture as was common in the neighborhood. It had a large front porch, probably built specifically for a tuberculosis patient, due to this house being built during a time when tuberculosis was rampant, and people thought sleeping outside would cure the ailment. At the time, I didn't know that, and pictured sitting on it and reading books in the afternoon during the summer. Inside the house, it was dark and damp. It had been empty for a while, The dark wood accents created a heavy atmosphere, and many of the doorknobs were original and didn't turn anymore. The first feeling I got there was a fierce loneliness. The layout was strange. 2 bedrooms flanked a ragged bathroom, the only entrance to it being through one of the bedrooms. The upstairs bedroom was huge and had numerous strange crawl spaces that had enough space in them to be entire rooms. One of them even had a dirty orange shag carpet. Its entrance was a tiny door in the small closet that would be my mom's. I instantly fell in love. I was crazy for creepy old houses, so immediately set to convincing my parents that this was the best choice. We moved in during the early summer. I really enjoyed living there at first. I had made friends in the neighborhood and had a really amazing summer. When the fall started cooling the weather, I began to get nervous being alone in my new home. One night, I was in the kitchen with my mother facing the living room, which was dark and had a large window facing the street. Often, cars drove by, lighting up the living room with their headlights. My mom was chopping vegetables and joking with me and my brother as I raised my eyes, not for the first time, to the living room as a car drove by. I instantly froze as I saw a large dark silhouette of a man in front of the window. My blood ran cold as I instantly jumped to the conclusion that someone had broken into our home. My mom looked up at me to see why I wasn't answering her, and raised her knife as she saw the expression on my face. We searched the entire house, and no one was there. My brother even checked outside, and no one was around, especially since there was only one way to get away, and it's a street where our neighbors had large fences. After that, I was on edge for maybe a day or two, before forgetting about it and continuing to work on my homeschooling program. I was trying to graduate early, so my attention was pretty focused on schooling. When I was home alone, which was a very common occurrence since my mom worked, I often heard someone walking around upstairs, which was my mom's room. I would go check to see if it were my cats or my dog, but no one was up there. Eventually, I stopped checking. Then, one evening after a long day of schoolwork, I sat down to watch TV in the living room. The stairs to my mom's room had an old door that was shut since she was asleep. The door was heavy and latched very securely, since it was difficult to open in the first place. As I sat enjoying a rerun on SNL, the doorknob turned and the door slowly swung open. I frowned and paused the show. I called out my kitten's name since my other cat was in my lap, and got up to see if she got stuck upstairs. I looked up the dark stairs and called out to my kitten. I heard something scuffling on the stairs, but couldn't see since turning on the light would wake up my mom. I sighed and pushed the door closed, convinced it was nothing since my kitten always meowed when she heard me calling her. I walked into my room, which was right next to the door to the stairs, and began searching for my cell phone. I turned to leave and watched again as the door swung open slowly. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck raise, and the air seemed electric. I immediately closed it and began searching for my kitten, who I found balled up in my brother's bed next to our dog. I felt a chill and went to bed shortly after. After that, the door was to open up slowly and purposefully in front of us often. We tried to debunk it by walking up and down the whole house and opening and closing all the doors to see if the door popped open due to the changing pressure. Nothing. It latched tightly, no matter what. Later, on Christmas morning, I went to go wake up my brother so we could go take a peek at our presents. He had been known to sleepwalk and to be very hard to wake up. So I shook him lightly, and he popped into a sitting position, startling me. "Sister, there's someone in my closet." I froze. His eyes were wide open as he told me this. I looked back at his closet, which was half closed. "He's gonna kill us, sister. He's hiding in there, waiting." I was hoarse with fear and demanded he go check it out. My brother suddenly woke up and then checked the closet, although he didn't know why I had made him do it. He didn't remember me telling him anything. That was the first time and the last time he's talked in his sleep. During all this time, the footsteps never stopped, and the front door sometimes would be wide open in the mornings when we were sure we had locked it the night before. I also started to hear voices coming from the vent of my room, which connected directly to the unfinished stone and dirt floor basement. The woman across the street told me the upstairs was large due to a family in the 1920s having so many children. They would sleep in dorm-like conditions up there with no heat. That was the only time she spoke to me, even though I tried to say hi to her many times before and after she said that. I also watched the strings on the blinds in the bathroom start to swing wildly after being completely still, next to a closed window on a hot, still day in August. I also thought I saw someone walk past our breakfast nook windows when I was outside doing yard work, and once when we were eating dinner on the patio. Both times I checked to see if someone was there. There never was. The house was always empty. All of this came to a head when I woke up one morning during the summer. My blinds were closed, but my window was open since we had no air conditioning. Light flooded in from the place where the window pane swung open. I woke up facing my desk I used for schooling and my office chair. In the office chair was a black figure with a white face and big black eyes. I screamed and rolled off the other side of my bed. When I looked back, the room was empty. The figure looked vaguely like No-Face from the movie Spirited Away. After that, I demanded that whatever was in the house leave me and my family alone, because it wasn't something I could handle anymore. We never had another experience in the 6 months we lived in the house after I did that. What's up, guys? Ghastly Ghoul here, and thank you so much for listening. If you liked the video, it'd be great if you would click the thumbs up button, comment, and share it with your friends. Please consider joining the Ghastly Gang by hitting that subscribe button. If you would like for me to narrate your scary story, please send it to my email address below, or post it on the Free Horror Stories subreddit. Also, please follow me on Twitter and like me on Facebook. That way you can keep up to date with what's happening on the channel. The links are below. And now, we must part ways, my friends. I fear you are living on borrowed time, for you'll never truly escape from the vault.